Hello everyone. There might still be some people coming in, but nevertheless, I think we should start so that we have sufficient time to discuss all the important things that we want to discuss about today. A warm welcome to everybody in this next plenary session, basically with a welcome and the summary of the last 2 days, and then also some general comments that I might make on behalf of what we've seen so far on EMP-E and some general remarks from my side. My name is Paul Uy. I'm professor at the Europa-Universität Flensburg, and I'm glad to be here today, not alone, but together with Sebastian Busch, who will basically take over the second part of our introductory words, basically explaining about important topics of this year's EMP-E conference. And basically to wrap up a bit of what has been talked upon, because not all of you have joined all sessions. Of course, I also couldn't join all sessions because there's like lots of parallel sessions. But just to put this into a bit of context, also what was this year's context, and which somehow also was visible in many discussions. We had kind of expected from a long time that there was around discussions regarding the impact of Brexit, what is with the Fit for 55 package on the European level, the upcoming COP and all the announcements related to this. And then there were quite some unexpected elements that came up this year. We have relatively high carbon prices in Europe. We have the impact of the pandemic on the energy system, basically the rebound that we discussed a lot about in the last days, and rising gas prices, shortages, and the need for more renewables. What are therefore main topics and headlines from EMP-E, from basically just taking the headlines and creating a wordle from this? You can see what are the most important buzzwords, I would say, that we have dealt with. And of course, there's like energy system, European sector, climate, EU scenario model. This is all understandable. These are all very general words. We see renewables still quite big, hydrogen a big element, solar, specific emissions that we are talking about. We speak also about gas, shown a bit smaller side. So basically there's lots of different topics. We speak about policies as well as costs. So therefore it's a relatively techno-economic discussion that has been ongoing, covering lots of different topics. And just to name some of them, I can't name them all because there has been far too many, but to name some takeaways from EMP-E, which are not objective, but subjective from my end. I would say that we definitely talked a lot about energy system modeling. This is important. However, we've also realized that we are, as we know, unable to predict the future. This can be, for example, be seen in the CO2 price, the rise of CO2 price that was a bit higher than expected by most models. So a lot of scenarios that we've seen these days actually have underestimated the CO2 price evolvement and therefore the influence on the energy system. What we've talked about is how to improve our models therefore. So therefore something that we're all calling for, of course, is better data, better cross-sectoral analysis, including like transportation, heating sector, all this. Time-space resolution can always be better depicted. It doesn't have to mean that we always have hourly resolution or inner hourly resolution necessary, but we somehow have to find good ways of having it still computable at the same time. The big talk also, especially today, will be about open data, software licenses, open models, etc. And then an additional aspect, which I want to highlight, qualitative aspects. So not techno-economic alone, but also what about other aspects, active behavior, political economy, acceptance issues. These are all important aspects, much more difficult, I would say, to model, and therefore partly also explaining why our models are not able to predict the future. So therefore, putting it in simplistic terms, holistic approaches are needed to find best solutions, which are still, of course, not easy to find. So what are additional takeaways? We have to think national strategies in a European context, which I think is very important, and then the European context within the global dimension, of course, as well. We've realized that functioning carbon pricing systems can transform the power sector. However, the transition of the transport, heating, and industry sector remains very unclear in Europe in general, but in some countries even more. And if you look at the different fuels, something I think that I haven't heard otherwise, at least at EMP-E and in general, coal is basically dead or is dying, and no one is really questioning that. Have to talk about just transition, of course, but no one is questioning the future of coal. We are, however, not sure exactly about the future for gas and oil. There's some announcing a strong decline. Others still have kind of a continuous need. Others see even rising need for gas for short term. Something that we somehow all appear to agree on is like renewables, storage system, transmission grids. These needs to accelerate. And in some cases, they need to accelerate at a speed much faster than we've seen it in the past. So this is really something huge question. How can we reach these acceleration rates that our models predict that we would need? So this is, I think, a big question also for policy, how to do this. There is in many models a very big need for hydrogen, negative emission technologies, CCS to reach net zero. And therefore, there's the question, how far is this mismatching also reality in some kind of way? We've seen a strong focus on techno-economic quantitative analysis, and this is maybe a shortcoming, and I just want to show a very small comment from my end, basically on the high hopes, for example, for hydrogen, whether this is just a hype. And there's a cautionary tale, I would say, because we could learn from experiences with high hopes for technological solutions. And we had such a solution that was discussed the last years, always carbon capture and storage, carbon capture, transport and storage, which could decarbonize energy sector and industry sector. We ourselves published a paper in 2011 on this because in the 2000s, there was a lot of hope, but not much really happening in practice for CCS. And then there was another paper published by a different authoring team this year stating that the next decade actually didn't look much different. So therefore, we've basically seen 2 decades of false hopes for CCS. And the big question is whether we might have a risk of seeing similar tendencies in hydrogen or other negative emission technologies. And therefore, I would say that we need more interdisciplinary works to investigate techno-economic as well as socio-political aspects of future transition. And therefore, I would like to encourage cooperation across projects, not only modeling projects, but also to other non-modeling projects. Because, for example, the European Commission is funding lots of projects in the sphere of many different ways of how the transition will evolve, not only quantitative, but also qualitative way. And I think it's important to broaden a bit our context, even though the EMP-E, of course, is having a focus on modeling itself. Doesn't mean that we can't talk to others in other conferences or anywhere else. And I think it's important. Some general remarks from my end on the EMP-E conference channel. I would say that online conferences are really good to exchange most up-to-date findings, and they, of course, has less travels. However, from my personal experience, they're not that good for networking and exchange, especially if people are not that familiar with one another. So I have fingers crossed that we might have a real EMP-E next year again in physical presence in Brussels, because I think this networking exchange, especially also among projects and political decision makers, is really needed and was something great and beneficial of EMP-E. The conference itself is a good mix, I think, of researchers, political decision makers, and industry. This was the case for this online event as well as the physical one. And we have managed to increase diversity, but I would still say that there is male speakers of Northern Europe dominating somehow. Especially the talks and the parallel sessions, I think, with respect to the panels, I think the organizers have done a great deal trying to attack this diversity a bit, but I think we can do even better in the future. Just some comment from my end. Then regarding the program on the third day, like what is upcoming for today's day? Basically, these are the welcoming and commenting words from my end, together with Sebastian. And then afterwards, we will move to a session on collaborative modeling practice. Like I've stated before, that I think that it's important for us to work together across projects. And this is something that we will be talking about here, basically in the next 2.5 hours. Then there's going to be an online lunch break, so you have to find food for yourselves. And then there's 4 different parallel sessions, and it's really difficult to decide which one you want to go to because they're all so interesting. Like one of them is on data and model transparency, another one on social and behavioral aspects, how to model renewables, and then another one on environmental assessment for energy modeling and policy. So these 4 are all in parallel, lasting from 2 until 3:30. Then afterwards, for those that managed to stay with us the entire day, at 3:30, there are some closing words by Andreas Zucker and others, basically ending the conference then at 4:30. So therefore, it's a really great conference, really great program. Thanks again to all organizers. And I hope as many people of you as possible continue to stay on throughout the entire day. I want to speak now some last words about collaborative and transparent modeling before I hand over to Sebastian Busch, using a bit also this slot to advertise a new European Forum for Energy and Climate Transition called EFFECT. So basically, this is a new initiative that was initiated only in 2021, so basically this year, by several universities in Europe. And basically, our idea is to contribute to collaborative modeling exercises with the aim to work together and to do this not within a project with a limited time frame, a limited budget, but basically out of intrinsic motivation to talk and to work on similar topics. Our essence is to work open and transparent. So basically everything should be available to be replicated by others. So therefore, there's a long vision on this. Basically, modeling activities should have a technological neutral perspective, a broad geographical representation in Europe. And our aim is to bring the European energy as well as the climate modeling community together, because I think we've been focusing a bit too much on energy modeling community only by ourselves. And therefore, the aim is to include climate modeling community as well in there, whether this is then in joint modeling, whether it's in soft coupling. This is to be discussed and depends a bit on individual projects brought forward by individual members of this forum. But I think this is the vision therefore. And the project effect will basically come up with different modeling missions to designated topics. And the topic for this year is sustainable infrastructure and energy commodities for sector integration. So therefore, if you want to engage on this is basically meaning discussions on these topics. These are papers which will be submitted to a journal afterwards to be then published as special issue, and basically to engage in communication and discussion among peers on these topics from the energy and climate sphere. Be invited to visit also the website of EFFECT, and then basically look at the call for contributions in more detail and join us basically. And if you're interested in who this is basically the main organizations that have kicked off this endeavor so far. I'm very confident that this number of institutions will even grow further in the future. They are like scattered all over Europe. Basically, we have lots of partners in Europe and also 2 partners beyond Europe, because I think it is of course important also to widen the sphere and see a bit what's happening outside of Europe, because energy and climate models have to include global aspects as well. So therefore, this was a very fast run from my end, basically through from what I would say the most important findings, so to speak, that we've seen in the first 2 days of EMP-E and what is still upcoming for today. And what is important also to work on these models jointly together. And so much from my side, and I'm very glad that I can now hand over to Sebastian Busch, a colleague that I've known from long times when we were both still PhD students, and who has now basically partly left the academic sphere and joined more the European Commission's perspective at the Joint Research Center. So Sebastian, the floor is basically yours. I would now stop my screen sharing so that you have the possibility to basically share also your screen. So Sebastian, we can now see your screen, but we cannot hear you if you're talking. So this just to make sure.
Okay. Now you can see me, right?
Yes, we can see you. It's not in presentation mode yet, the slides, but we can see and hear you.
So no.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Then first of all, thank you very much, Paul. The pleasure is also all mine. And good morning, dear colleagues. Also welcome from my side to the 3rd day of the EMP-E conference and to the 3rd plenary session. My name is Sebastian Busch, and I'm a project officer at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, which is the European Commission's in-house science and knowledge service. And our mission is to support EU policies with independent evidence throughout the whole policy cycle. Since the theme of today's day is collaborative modeling, let me start with some very give you some brief impressions on how we use collaborative modeling within the JRC, within the Commission, and what are our roles in this regard. So basically, there are 2 important pillars. The first one is the policy for science pillar. And here, for instance, the JRC is supporting DG RTD in the development of the Horizon Europe program, which, as we all know, is an important source of funding for European modeling projects. Then there is a second pillar, science for policy, which is really at the core of the role of the JRC in the Commission. Here, a typical example would be that we do use results from modeling studies to support policy DGs like DG ENER or DG Klima in the development of legislative proposals. And these modeling results can both be derived from the modeling community, from like Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe projects or Horizon 2020 so far, or be complemented by own in-house modeling that where we also have tools within the Commission and in particular within the JRC. And then there's a third element, which is the linkage between these two pillars, which can in many cases be quite complex. So that therefore the JRC also has a knowledge management role within the Commission, where knowledge is transmitted and interpreted and synthesized from one pillar to the other. And it's important to emphasize here that this is also a two-way process, meaning that also findings from the policy making are fed back into the research community, for instance. And one exemplary element of this is the hosting of maintenance and management of big data sets. And here I'm just showing you exemplarily some selected data sets that our unit has been involved in developing and that can be used for energy modeling. So the first one here is a data set of European power plants. Espresso is a database of potentials of renewable energies. EMIRES is a database of highly resolute renewable energy production profiles. And the last one is a repository of different data sets in the water energy nexus and contains, for instance, time series of hydro inflows, which are of course also of interest to energy modelers. And there will also be, there are more products in the pipeline that could be of interest to some of you. So I stay tuned for updates and check out our website when you have a chance from time to time. And I would also like to share with you that currently we in the Commission are also exploring potential benefits of an online dashboard with modeling parameters. So some sort of one-stop scheme that would even easier make available relevant modeling parameters to people engaged in this activity. And here we would be interested to hear your remarks or ideas. So first of all, to hear in general if you think this could be useful, if this would be supported by the European Commission, because we are aware there are already some very good initiatives out there. But if there are maybe further things that could be done, and maybe if you have some concrete ideas of elements that are missing in current modeling databases or any general remarks, we would be happy to hear back from you, either in the concluding discussion of this session or afterwards. You can contact us by email. Finally, also one small advertisement. So if you think what I've been talking about is something that you could also be interested in, I would also invite you to check out the current job openings, which can be done under the first link. And then only to add that under certain conditions, it is required that you take a pre-selection test. And this is further explained under the second link. So if you're interested in that, please have a look at both these links and also feel free to get in touch in case of questions. With that, it's then time to move on to our plenary panel. Here you see again the four speakers. Each of them will speak for around 15 minutes, and afterwards we will have a Q&A session. So please do already tap the Q&A button during the talk if you have any questions, and fill them in there. So, and we will afterwards pick some of them. But if some questions come to your mind later, you can continue to add them, and also speakers and also ourselves, the plenary chairs, will try to answer them in writing subsequently. With that, I think I now hand back over to Payu, who will then introduce our first speaker, Daniel. And I'll come back to you later to introduce then the second speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. So therefore, I'm glad to basically take over again. And once more, also, we apologize that other people are not able to show their screens or something, but this is more of a webinar mode within the panel sessions, as you've seen already in the previous one. So therefore, this is the way that this is done. But nevertheless, as Sebastian said, don't be shy to type in your questions already beforehand. That was already the first question directed to me, which I responded already in the chat. So therefore, there you can see how things work. So therefore, gladly handing over from Sebastian Busch to Daniel Huppmann. So basically, Daniel is coordinating the research theme scenario services and scientific software of the Energy, Climate and Environment program at IIASA, so the International Institute for Applied System Analysis. And his team develops database infrastructures and open source scientific software packages for model comparison and scenario analysis, aiming to foster a culture of open science in the European and international energy modeling community. So therefore, I think it is fair to say that Daniel is on the one hand not only an expert in energy modeling itself, but especially also in the way of how to promote this in a fair way. And therefore, I'm glad that he is now presenting with us, and therefore, Daniel, opening up the floor to yours. So.
Thank you very much, Paul and Sebastian, for sharing the session, for the introduction. And thank you in particular for giving me the opportunity to present our work in the Open Entrance Horizon 2020 project as part of the plenary on collaborative modeling in practice. I want to not so much focus on the model linkage yet, because the next speakers will talk more about what they have done in terms of model linkage in their projects. I want to stay a bit on the meta level, on the basics. What do you need before you can actually start doing model linkage in model comparison projects like what we are doing in Open Entrance? To give you a quick introduction of the Open Entrance project, the aim is to develop, use, and disseminate an open, transparent, and integrated modeling platform for assessing low-carbon transition pathways in Europe. Paul has already shown earlier this word cloud of all the topics that were discussed in the last 2 days: energy prices, decarbonization, climate neutrality, etc. Open Entrance seeks to create quantitative pathways using a number of models to inform that policy discussion. And not just inform that on the policy side, but also build an open and transparent and integrated modeling platform. And we're currently in the discussion of what do we actually understand under a modeling platform. This is one of the issues where if you use the word, one of these cases where if you use the word modeling platform, everybody has an idea. And then when you start implementing it, you realize that the ideas might actually diverge quite a bit between the consortium partners. And that is a very productive and very insightful discussion we are having right now in the project. What are the two main insights that I want to convey today? First, most modelers have understood that open source is the new normal. If you have a black box model, that just doesn't cut it anymore in today's scientific research domain. The issue is that a lot of the modelers, they've understood, okay, we have to do something open source and collaborative, but how to actually go about this, there is not as much knowledge yet as there should be. And I'll show one item that we have produced in the project where we try to improve that situation. The second observation, not very surprising to everyone listening today's, modelers really like to work on their models, and they like much less to work on the integration of different models. That is interesting on a conceptual level, but actually building these pipelines, these workflows to take the modeling results from one model, put them into another as an input, see what's happening there, put that back. That is a lot of work that is frequently underestimated by applied modelers. So they often wait too long. If you have a 3-year, 4-year project, they very often, well, they improve their models and add new features, and then at a very late stage, they start thinking about, okay, how do we actually do model linkage? So the second part of my presentation will be which kind of tools have we developed to hopefully make that easier and less painful for modelers to start building these pipelines for model linkage. So how do we go about being open and fair? As I said, everybody has accepted that this is really important, but how to go about that? When we started discussing in our consortium, but also in other contexts, we realized, well, a lot of people don't really know how to do that. Like, yeah, just put it somewhere on the internet, on a project website, and that's probably good enough. And the answer is, no, it's not good enough. So there are a lot of good tutorials and introductions, but modelers often don't like to read very long texts or tutorials on how to, for example, follow FAIR principles. So we put together this one slide of what can you do, and I'll walk you through these steps. And one thing that I'm quite proud of is that we have managed to follow each step on that slide in itself. So I'll use the slide as an illustration of how you should follow the steps that we talk about on this slide. The first thing that you should do is being open. So open source, allowing others to reuse your work. So first step is open. And if you look here, there is a Creative Commons by license. So there is an open source license applied to this one slide. The second part is it should be findable. So there should be a digital object identifier, a DOI for all your work, and also a recommended citation. You should make it easy for others to use your work, to find your work, and then also to tell others that they have used your work. And if you look here on the left-hand side, here is actually the recommended citation. Pao Yu, chair of this session, and Ingeborg Grabak, the consortium lead, have contributed to developing that. And we have also issued a DOI so that you can always find this information or this slide via the digital object identifier pointing to the IASA library. The third part is it should be accessible even after the project is over. So that is why we have not just put it on the Open Entrance EU website, which might be discontinued a couple of years after the end of the project, but we have deposited that slide on the IASA library, which we, I think, can safely assume will still be around 10, 20 years from now. The fourth part is interoperable using community standards. It is a slide. It is implemented in PowerPoint. So that is item number 4. Pretty much everybody knows how to work with PowerPoint, even if they might prefer LaTeX. But using this standard makes it very easy for others to build on that work. And that is also related here to the 5th point, building on our work reusable. There is a version number. So version 1.0 up here. So if we realize a mistake or somebody suggests an improvement, it is clear which version of a slide has been used somewhere else. 5 simple steps. The idea is that any PhD student, any early career researcher who wants to apply fair and open source practices, they can just print that out, put that on their desk next to their laptop screen, and can say, okay, am I actually following this work? Rather than having a 10-page document that just sits somewhere and is collecting dust. So that is one, I think, quite pragmatic step that we have taken in the Open Entrance project to inform researchers and modelers how they can apply better open and fair practices in our project, but then also in other projects. Now turning to how do you actually develop model linkages? If you want to compare or link various models like a power sector model, an energy system model, a natural gas infrastructure model, a socioeconomic model that talks to you about behavior change in society, you need three aspects. You need a data format. How are you going to pull the data out of one model and put it into another? You need a common language to describe what are your results, what are you actually talking about. And then you need some pipelines, some workflows to implement that model linkage. So some scientific software routines, Python, R, Julia, GAMS, to take the data from one place and put it somewhere else. There are three projects that I want to mention here. And in the last two EMP-Es, we had focus group sessions with them to contrast their approaches with ours. I'll just summarize that here, and I hope that they will not be offended by how I have described them. I know that both Ludwig Hülk and Stefan Fenninger are listening in today, so maybe they can chime in if they feel they have been unfairly represented. First, I want to talk about the open energy ontology led by Ludwig Hülk and the Rainer Luhrmann Institute, and I call it the holistic approach. They, over a couple of years now already, have led a discussion process to describe every word that you might need for energy modeling, including also physical and social concepts. So they are building an ontology, a dictionary. What do we mean when we say wind power? It's a very bottom-up, very holistic, very comprehensive approach. Very much talking about what do words mean. The second, I call that the software tool-based approach, is by the Sentinel project, the friendly data package that they are implementing. And there it is a solution to convert model-specific formats and naming conventions to common standards. So their approach is they will build a software solution that takes whatever comes from a model and translates it to whatever another model needs. And I put the link here. Take a look at that project. I think it's quite interesting, but also quite challenging because there are a lot of different combinations that you have to keep in mind when building that kind of package. The third part is what we are doing in Open Entrance, and I call it the dictatorial approach. We, at the beginning of the project, said that is the data format, that is the list of variables, of regions that we allow, and we set up a workflow, a process for what you have to do if you want to add new words, new region definitions, etc., to that project. Dictatorial because as long as it's not agreed by everybody, then you're not allowed to use that. And at the end of the day, it is me deciding if a new suggestion goes into that nomenclature of variables, regions, units, etc. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Before going about the nomenclature, yes, now I'll just focus on our open entrance approach. I want to say a word about the data format that we are using. It is developed originally by the integrated assessment community. It's used by the IPCC and several Horizon 2020 projects. It's adopted by roughly 50 teams globally, and it's a very simple tabular format. There is a column for model name, scenario name, a region identifier, variable unit, and then the values as columns. Before, the format did not support sub-annual resolution, which, if you look at decarbonization pathways, is of course very important to have something. So in the Open Entrance project, we implemented an extension to also include sub-annual resolution. Now, what is actually written? What are the words that are allowed in the region column or in the variable column in that data format? We wanted to develop a nomenclature in a way that is not sending around an Excel table, which gets longer and longer over the 4 years of the project. But we wanted to move that to GitHub. GitHub is a version control tool. It's mainly intended for software, but we came up with some ideas how this could also work for this kind of nomenclature development. So there are collaboration tools for discussion, for finding agreement, and then making a change suggestion and approving that name suggestion. For example, for saying we need a way to talk about a new form of wind turbine design, and how are we going to include that in our model linkage. It's based on a YAML text file format because that is both human readable and easy to use in scripts and workflows. There are some useful features, in particular if you're working with ISO 2, ISO 3 codes or the NUTS region mappings. And there is also an installable Python package. A lot of the work that we are doing in this project, but also at IASA generally, we provide Python as a way to work with our tools, but you are not forced to use Python. So we try to do these things that you can use the Python tools, but if you say, actually, I rather do my own thing in R, then that is always possible. Because we've realized forcing everybody to use Python will not work in the broader modeling community. So we try to be useful, but not prescriptive. If you're interested, then please go to our GitHub repository, open entrance nomenclature, and read more about how this works. Now, I also mentioned that the pipelines are super important. Like, how do you actually do, how do you get the data from one model into another model? How do you do the data processing? How do you work with aggregation, downscaling, unit conversions, converting between different data formats? For example, from Excel to the frictionless data package. So over the last couple of years, we have developed a Python package, PyM, which is intended as a community package for doing all kinds of scenario processing, analysis, and visualization. So it does data processing. If one model is at the national scale and another model is at a macro region scale, then PyM gives you a feature to aggregate from the national to the macro region spatial resolution. Similar, if one model is working in gigawatt hours and another uses exajoule, there is a tool for that. What PyM also does is validation, so checks for completeness of data, for consistency, plausibility, and then there are a lot of analysis and visualization features like a plotting library, categorization, statistics. We just brought out a manuscript in Open Research Europe, a new open access journal supported by the European Commission. The UI is here. And I want to briefly talk about what about the design principles of that package, because we didn't just want to develop our own tool and put it somewhere and then hope that people use it. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for many different users, for many different kinds of users to use that. So for all kinds of modelers, researchers, analysts, and if they're Python experts, they can use that. And if they're Python novices, they should also be able to find that project useful. So there are a lot of tutorials, even a tutorial for R users, how they can use R and Python together. There are published manuscripts. We have a mailing list, a Slack channel, GitHub repository, and also some activity on social media, so that whatever is most comfortable for a particular user, they find a communication channel that is right for them. For those who know Python, they certainly know the pandas package, which is the main data analysis package. And we've tried to follow that. And Pao Yu has switched on his camera, which I take as an indication that I should speed up. So I just want to move forward. one initiative that we're currently doing in the Open Entrance Scenario Explorer. So we have this web-based tool where we are going to publish the scenario results from our project. And we will enable, or we have already enabled other consortia, other modeling teams to upload their scenario results to our Scenario Explorer. The advantages for other modeling tools that might not have a cool, fancy web-based user interface is that you can use ours. You have a state-of-the-art web user interface. You can easily compare your results to the Open Entrance results. And you can also use some fancy features of the IASA database infrastructure, like some integration with the PyM package, so you can directly query the data from our web database into Python or R via some tools. If you're interested in that, please look at data EC IASA ACAT/Open Entrance. There is a tab called Data Submission, read the terms of use. And I think what would be most interesting for us today to discuss is, are modelers actually interested in using our platform for disseminating their results? Is there some interest in that? And if yes, how would we have to make that work so that others can actually use that in an efficient way? Sorry for jumping over so many slides. The presentation is available on the IASA library under this link. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So people having questions, feel free to use the Q&A function. And even if the time is not enough for Daniel to respond to them, you can then surely respond to it in a written format in parallel to the other talks. There's one question, I would say probably / more comment by Carsten Heuer-Klick. He states that one comment to the common language, what may be more important than the data is the metadata, which makes your data findable. So he will basically talk about this in the next parallel session. So therefore there's a co-advertisement, so to speak. Maybe still you want to comment on this, and I'm adding one question from my end. If there's now a new PhD students coming up and I want to give them like one website to look at or one link where basically they have an overview of all these different elements that you mentioned, is there something that you could indicate? Because it's like 10 different projects, elements, all of them have their necessity, but at the same time, it seems like overwhelming for people that are not that familiar with this topic as you are.
You're absolutely right. There are a lot of parallel projects. So let me use that question as a plug for the one slide that I didn't show. And that is a new project that is starting, EC-EMF. And what I find quite interesting here is that the European Commission changed their strategy. So if you go back a couple of years, they always had parallel consortia, like Open Entrance, Sentinel, the Spine project, and before that were SatNav, Medea, like they always had parallel tracks. So you had up to, you had teams of 15 teams and then several in parallel. What the EU has now done is change their strategy to only have one large consortium. And I hope that this will help what the point that Paul, you raised, that there will be a convergence towards a one-stop shop, that there will then be one big project that will collect a lot of different scenario results, tools, etc. And also, in particular for EC-EMF, we have designed that in a way that it's not just a consortium that can participate, but every modeling team that wants to contribute can then join this forum. How this will work exactly, we're figuring that out, but at least that is the ambition that we currently have. Mm-hmm. I hope that that answered your question. On the question by Carsten, yes, the metadata is super important. My main comment, and I hope that I can join your session and maybe we can discuss that further there, but my main concern is that when modelers talk about metadata, they think author, year, title, and that's it. And when a librarian thinks about metadata, they think about hundreds of different categories. So the question is, how can we actually get modelers to not just put the 3 minimum metadata indicators, but to really provide a comprehensive overview of the data set or the tool that they are that they have developed. But maybe talk further about that in your parallel session.
Sounds good. So thank you very much once more. And now handing over to the next session. So basically, Sebastian will introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you also from my side to Daniel. And now I have the pleasure to introduce to you Sandrine Chausset. Sandrine is with EDF and has more than 20 years of experience in energy management and optimization. And Sandrine has been the coordinator of the Plan for Risk project that she will, and today she will present to us the outcomes from this project. And she is now currently also intensely involved in the sorry, help me again.
Open entrance.
And the open entrance project, which Daniel just talked about. With that, I hand over to you, Sandrine. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Sebastian, for the introduction. Thank you, you and Heidi for chairing, and the organizers for giving me the opportunity of explaining the main results of that Plan for Risk project. So that project just ended in last April after 3.5 years of intense work with all the people from the consortium just above. The main objective of the project was to implement models and tools providing an integrated energy system representation that is able to optimize and simulate the expansion and operation of the system in the context of a high share of renewable energy. This, of course, contributing to the European targets for reduction of emissions and maintaining high quality of supply at lowest cost. So very ambitious aim, and I'm going to try in 10 minutes to show you what we have done with also a big focus on openness. So the main results of this project, they have been, first, we have implemented the tools that we wanted to implement. Mainly it's composed of a set of optimization models, which are interconnected with through workflows. And in the end, we succeeded into doing that integrated modeling of the pan-European energy system. For being able to do that, we have implemented an IT platform which helps running the models mainly. So it's dealing with everything that is, has to do with access to data, but also high performance computing resources, because those optimization models, they are big, they are complex, so they require intense computation facilities. It's allowing flexibility in the modeling, so you can replace some models by other submodels, and it also allows access to the most efficient solution algorithms. And in the project, there were also some intense work on those solution algorithms. We also have, of course, created some data because we needed to validate the tools that we had implemented, and we have made everything public and tried to follow all the advices from Daniel. So everything is on Zenodo with a DOI, hopefully not too bad. And we have done 3 case study exercises, mainly to show that the tool is working. But through these case studies, we also succeeded into getting some information on policy messages. So the first part was the modeling. So this work was a really joint work, and in the end we have a long paper describing all the equations of the model. So the modeling that we have done, it's mainly decomposed in 3 categories of models. So the first part is what is in green. That's about investment. So this is deciding investment decisions. And here we have implemented 3 different models, one about transmission expansion, one about multi-energy decisions, and one focused on electricity. Then we have everything that we call scenario evaluation, which is much related with simulation. So the idea is to evaluate the investment decisions, but it's not only simulation because it also includes optimization methods for optimizing, in particular, the seasonal storage or all the optimization of all the assets of the system, and some additional tools for analysis. Then what may interest this session more is that most of those models, they have been developed using an open modeling library, which is called SMS++. So this will be presented more in detail in the plenary, the para session 9 this afternoon. So this library, it has been a long work started a few years ago, and then within the Plan for You project, this library was extended. And in the end, the library is available on GitLab, and it allows to design easily, or much more easier than in the past, implementation of energy model, but it can do much more than energy models. But here we are talking mainly of energy. So it's especially designed for large structured problems, which is particularly fitted to our EU wide problem, because it exploits decomposition. It allows to use any kind of solvers, so in particular specialized solvers. Most of them are already interfaced, and SMS++ also includes some homemade solvers, so like MILP solvers or decomposition or stochastic dual dynamic programming or lots of others. And it already includes what we call blocks for the full modeling of electric system at nearly all time horizons, so long-term, years, to short-term, which is simulation over 1 week or 1 year at hourly resolution. We're not going under now, but it could be done. So this will be today this afternoon, so I will not go back to it now, but everything is on GitLab. The license is allowing everyone to use it. And so it's fully available and advertised, hopefully. And something else that was missing is the environment, because when you have a model, sometimes it's difficult to run it. You have the computer that your employer has brought to you. Sometimes you do not have access to something else, and using a model on a Macintosh when it has been designed to work on Linux is sometimes quite complex. So in Plan for Us, we have developed the environment that allows to use all the models on every environment, and it was tested on Windows, Linux, and Macintosh. And it also allows to run the models on a wide range of hardware, from your laptop to supercomputers. And we have tested on our own supercomputer at EDF and also on an Amazon cloud. So this is based on a containerized computer environment, which allows to run the same executables everywhere, to have no issues about dependencies, and everything is automatically built and updated. And of course, everything is open source and you can find it on GitLab. This helped us a lot for being able to run those big models and do lots of simulations. Then regarding solving algorithms, there have been some lots of progress made during the project, in particular on 3 topics. One was mixed integer linear programming, and there was a new release of the skip optimization suite. It was adapted to the problem that we have and integrated to the SMS++ library. And there were updates also on an open source stochastic optimization library that had been designed earlier at EDF, which has been also integrated to SMS++, allowing easy use of it. and of course the most part decomposition algorithms, which of course are included in SMS++ with methods like bundles, or Lagrangian decomposition, and SDDP, and lots of others. In the end, what we have implemented in the project is that series of models. So one of them is still implementation ongoing, as it was not scheduled in the project, but we are implementing it for the needs of the Open Entrance project. So those 3 investment models, and then a series of evaluation models, one which is going on a very high spatial resolution through the electricity analysis, a gas network optimization model, and then classical electricity models for storage valuation or unit commitment. We also have issued a database of public data, which is available on Zenodo. In particular, we have published scenarios for meteorology-dependent data, which are hourly scenarios for 35 different typical climatic years, including electricity demand inflows, wind and PV profiles, and in 1 year, all those different variables, they are correlated. And all the case studies datasets have also been published. So you will note that the last case study dataset was based on one of the Open Entrance newly published scenarios. So first link. And the last thing I wanted to insist on is the linkage that we have done of the model, the Plan for EU model, which is the electricity system optimization model, to the Open Entrance platform. So in the left, you have our model, which is running on our platform with our nice environment. On the right, you have Open Entrance and the Scenario Explorer. And we have implemented all those nice Python workflows for being able to create data sets using the Open Entrance scenarios, so based mainly on the Open Entrance scenarios and complementary data. And for this, we have used extensively the PyM package that Daniel has just been talking of, mainly for formatting, aggregating, disaggregating, uploading the data. So then we can run, we could run the Plan for EU model with data from the Open Entrance scenario, which are built in using the Open Entrance format and then translated into the Plan for EU model, as the model was developed before the Open Entrance project. It has its own data format. And then we have also implemented a series of Python scripts also for visualization and for converting the results of the model back to the Open Entrance format and uploading to the Scenario Explorer. And what I wanted to insist of here is that it was pretty easy to do that and didn't require a very high experience on Python, or you don't need to be an IT expert to do that. And finally, in the project, so we have run 3 different case studies for establishing that the model was working. So the first one was about sector coupling, and Plan for us has issued its own scenarios also. The second one was about a transmission extension network, and then the last one, which was done with the Plan for EU model and the Open Entrance scenario, was about assessing feasibility of scenarios and cost of renewable integration. Some results, if I have time, you do not hesitate to interrupt me, as I cannot see you on Zoom. So the first case study It demonstrated that a coupled modeling of the integrated pan-European energy system was possible. So it insisted very much on constraints from coupling the grid and the gas network together with power to gas. And it issued 6 scenarios, which will be published very soon, considering all those coupling between electricity, heating, cooling, mobility. And one of the scenarios was looked at very much deeper, especially for the electricity dispatch with a very high resolution, together with market clearing and cross-border exchange. And finally, there was the last bit of the workflow was about gas network modeling, which was a successful proof of concept because it showed that it's feasible to analyze together gas and electricity. So the second case study was about transmission grid expansion planning. So it was demonstrated for a complete European electricity system with 3 countries, and it created pathways from 2020 to 2060. The focus of this case study was really to identify the role of energy storage in facilitating the transition to a renewable system. And it showed that energy storage had what was called a significant option value compared to more capacity interconnection expansion. So this has been presented also already in day 2 of the conference, so you can find the video later on. And finally, the last case study was focused on the electricity system. So the objective was first to evaluate the feasibility of a long-term scenario, given the technical constraints, the detailed technical constraints of the electricity system, and to assess its cost. And this was made possible with that linkage to the open entrance database. It's also shown that the model made it possible to run some flexibility assessment studies, and there are some examples that are available. We have published this case study about flexibility of a given kind of thermal power plant asset, or flexibility, more flexibility on storage. And it was also used to do some sensitivities about hosting more variable renewable with different sensitivities on the scenarios with more or less renewable, and it's shown what impact it has on how the model is using the electricity mix. So there will be a bit more details on this case study this afternoon in a parallel session. And so this is my last slide. So all the results of the project, or nearly all the results, are available. Some will be available in a few weeks. So we have put all the public reports and the data on Zenodo, where there is a Plenary community. Then here you can also find the link to all the repositories for the solvers, for the modeling library SMS++, and for the environment in particular, the container and the platform for continuous improvement and development. So thank you very much. And I cannot see the questions from here, so.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. So I can help with the questions. But first, thanks very much for this, showing us all the work that has been done, and also for giving us a good example of collaborative modeling between the Plan for RES and the open entrance projects. So now I have a look at the question and answer panel, and I see there's a question by Tom Brown, and he's asking what is actually the spatial resolution of the time series data you have been talking about? Is it if it's at NUTS 2 or NUTS 3 level? Can you say something like this?
I think it's not exactly NUTS2 because it has been done in relation with the EMP-E Highway 2050 project, where they have defined some clusters which look like the NUTS2, except that it's not administrative regions but electrical regions. So it's a bit similar to NUTS2, but so this is the data we have published. But in the database from the Climate for Energy project, they have data, in particular for the wind power and PV power, are at a much smaller resolution, which is, I think, squares of 50 by 50 kilometers. But we can't really use that in an energy system modeling, so we had to aggregate.
Mm. Okay, yeah, thanks. I think that answers this question. Let me just check. This is it, I think, for now. Then I would suggest we will still have the chance after all the panelists, after all the speakers, to for a concluding session to add further questions there. Then for now, I think we will go on, and I will hand back over to Payu to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, hello. So thank you very much. And thanks also for everybody who's sticking basically to the time, which also allows us afterwards to have additional more time to discuss the different findings. I think there's also another question to Sandrine, which came in, which she will now respond to in the chat regarding the relation between Plan for EU and Plan for RES, but she will respond to this in the chat and then everybody can see that. But not wanting to take away the time from our next speaker, basically I'm handing over now directly. So basically, Cruz Enrique Borges is basically a mathematician in training, and he's currently developing a lot of projects related to energy efficiency and the development of prediction algorithms in the energy sector, so a bit more from the mathematical perspective. And he has a lot of experiences in working on European projects, including 5 Horizon 2020 projects, so therefore I think he's a perfect fit for today's talk. And his scientific interests are focused on the development of experimental designs, in particular for the validation of energy efficiency actions and the application of artificial intelligence for the development of decision support tools. And I'm very much interested in your takes on this topic. And you're talking about embracing the open science concept and experiences from the Y project. So looking forward to your talk. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity to present the results from the results that the methodology or the approach that we are taking in Y project to share our results and to participate in the open science concept. So first, I'm going to make up a short presentation about why this is a European project that has just recently started. So this talk is not about how we are going to share our results, but more how we have approached the open science concept here. And later on, I hope we can give a presentation more as the previous one, where we present the actual results of this collaboration between projects with the stakeholders and with other researchers. So the key objective of Y is improving the assessment of electrical energy consumption trends on household by using causal models and then implementing them in other energy system models. So we are going to try to focus on how households implement or wanted to invest in energy efficiency, in the distributed generation, demand response, and electrification of services. And then later on, we wanted to try to implement those things that those concepts and those models that we develop in leading energy system model. So, but today's objective is not to present the result of the project, it's how we are trying to foster collaboration between our team, the team from Y, and the rest of the research community and stakeholders and other people. So The first thing that it's probably important is, well, okay, what is understood by open science? Okay, so this is the European Commission, let's say, manifesto. There is others, for example, the one from the UNESCO that has been shown by Robinson in one of the skill development workshops on the first day. But this is an alternative one, and I think that also the first panelist has already shown a couple of sentences about this. But here it's like 6-7 pillars that the European Commission is taking for Horizon Europe, and also is fostering in its 2020 project. But I mean, the first things are, I mean, they are basing on open access. I mean, trying to provide open access to open access. I mean, to all fair data, open data, sharing results early, all metrics, citizen science, promoting responsible research, and open research Europe. I'm going to try to show how Y is addressing all those aspects by one. So let's start with the first easy ones. This, for example, Almetrics. So the Almetrics is an alternative learning metrics providing detailed context and qualitative data based on online and social media citation of work. Is basically an alternative to Edge Index and impact factor. But we are not contributing anything, at least we're just tracking them for reporting. I mean, this is one of the easiest one. And then we are going to one of the things that are, I mean, this is the basic, let's say, it's called Open Access and Open Research Europe, that has already been shown in a couple of times in the previous panelists. It's just providing on the open, free of access, and with an open license, the results, published results, okay? Yeah, the Open Research Europe is a new platform that the European Commission is fostering in order to, this is a journal with a very interesting approach to open science, and I foster you to take a look to it, because I think it's a very way forward, and we should try to publish our results there. And we have committed to publish as much as we can there. And if not, we are going to take the basic, I mean, gold open access, and that's it. Okay. I have been prepared a slide for presenting fair data, but I think that the first panelist has already provided a very good introduction to this, so I'm going to go fast about that. And I think that the key points, it's that you need to have a plan, and you need to have a plan from the start, and this is an important point. So invest some time in your data management plan to be able to compile with the fair data. And I wanted to just say a couple of things that we think that is going to be important. I mean, the first one is that you don't need to put everything on Zenodo. I mean, Zenodo is a good place to put things, but then you need to try to look for the right place to put the data. I mean, it's easier to find the data when it's in the right place. I mean, if you have data about genetics, don't put in Zenodo, put in a database for genetic data and this kind of things. So, for example, the platform that EASA have showed, it's a good place to put your results and put your models and put your examples. So it's a good place to not only to put things on Zenodo, but looking for these platforms, because it's the place where a lot of people are going to look for the data. And also try to work with the open license, and don't forget the legal and ethical revision of things that you are going to publish before making a mistake. And I wanted to stress this quote for one of the person of the advisory board that have recently said to us. He was saying that it's going to be, invest time in your data sets, because it's probably the most important contribution to the science community. I mean, providing good curated data sets useful to the entire community is probably one of the biggest achievements that we can do. It's something that we can leverage a lot. So put your time here and try to do our best to fulfill that. Then we are going to, I am going also to talk about the responsible research and innovation. I mean, this term describes the scientific research and technological development process that take to account effect to address the potential impact on the environment and the society environment, I mean, the impact in the negative sense of your research and innovation. And this is an important point, that as we all are doing research that is going to influence policy, will have a huge impact on the society. So we need to be careful on what we do and what we say. If you are using artificial intelligence models and this kind of black box models, take an extra steps, an extra careful on checking that, because you can introduce bias that you are not going to be able to clearly see them, and it's important that we are sure that the result that we are producing, we can explain and reason and understand quite well what is happening inside. So for this, it's important that you bring the consortium expert on ethics and evaluation of results. I mean, not just in the policy context, but also in the ethics context. So for example, in why we have already addressed that, bringing the ethics research center of the University of Deusto, but there is a lot of other centers and other approach to do this kind of ethic assessment of the result of your project. So citizen science is another of the pillars, and citizen science is a process to involve citizens into the science process. I mean, and there is several levels, from crowdsourcing, that is just using your citizens as sensors, to more and more involucration of them into the science process. And in why we are trying to, I mean, why is not a project that it's easy to do citizen science, but we are going to do our best, and we are going to participate in crowdsourcing. So the idea is that we are going to use citizens to collect some data that we need into the project. But our objective is to try to go a little bit below, I mean, to distribute intelligence. And also we are trying to use this Telegram bot to ask people and to interpret some results that we are going to produce, in order to get something in the middle between the first and the second level. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to go to the later stage in this project, but I mean, yeah, we are doing our best. There is other projects where this is easier to do. But this is an important point, to involve citizens into your research project, because at the end, they are the ones that pay for them, in fact. So let's go to the second part of the talk. That is what we understand why the open science in the web project, but in the fourth most complex issue. It's stakeholder involvement, advisory boards, summer schools, and open source. So how we are going to involve stakeholder in why? I mean, the first thing is that you need to create a distribution list, and this is some basics. I mean, this is something that you need to do. But one of the first things that we have done, and I think that we have done it right, is to involve them even before the kickoff meeting. I mean, this is an important point, trying to involve them as soon as possible into your project. In fact, if you can invite them to the kickoff meeting, it's a good idea. And now that we do mostly everything online, it's more easier than ever. So then it's basic to have regular feedback session with them. I mean, and take advantage of every kind of events. For example, the Green Week, the Energy Week, project meeting, milestone. Very important, join action with your sister projects. I mean, this is one of the things that is most important in order to combine the stakeholder from different projects and to do this kind of multiplier actions, but conference, another type of session. So try to meet your sister project and try to create a plan with them in order to involve stakeholders and your advisory boards and these kind of things. And then do not be shy of asking them for help. I mean, they have signed to be in the advisory board because they are interested on your projects. And if they are interested in your projects, is because they wanted to know the results and they are willing to help in achieving your results. So do not be shy. Ask them as soon as you can and as much as you will. And also, this is an important point, involvement and decision making. I mean, they tend to not like to be used. They wanted to be, to participate. So if you can, try to involve them into decision making. I mean, to not make them just a one-way direction of information, or just to be used to take their information and that's it. It's the best way to work with them is to foster a collaboration and involve them in decision making. I mean, if you have to take a decision, consult with them, trying to reach an agreement and trying to follow the recommendation, because at the end they are the expert, the end user of the main buyers. I mean, they are the panel. I mean, you have selected them because they are the panel that you think it's going to be the most interesting stakeholders. I mean, the expert for your project. So it's important. And if you have to take one thing of this talk, I think it's this one. I mean, when you are addressing them, the only thing that we have found that this works is semi-structured interviews. I mean, it's time consumed, are much more effective than anything else, except perhaps long focus group, that are face-to-face focus group, that are no little bit difficult to be done, but I mean, it's something that you need to consider. The amount of information that you get and the amount of adherence to your project that you get with face-to-face meetings, it's far about whatever you wanted to do. So if you wanted to take one recommendation from this talk, is this one. Now, time to discuss about the advisory board. That what we have, everything that we have said about the stakeholders apply also to the advisory board. Because at the end of the day, they are another stakeholder, but the advisory board, I'm more thinking on the, let's say, the research part of the stakeholders. I mean, your peers, basically. Here is something that has worked more or less well in why is that the final review board for every deliverable that you are going to produce, to peer review your deliverable. It's not just to make an internal peer review, but also an external one. And this is also a quality control measure, but also a networking activity. The main problem is that it could destroy your timing, and if you wanted to do it right, you need to provide some time to the expert to review. But then you are not going to fulfill your obligation with the commission. So it's a trade-off that you need to control quite, you need to be, to control it carefully. And I think it's a wonderful activity because it's not a control, I mean, a quality control measure, but that's not a networking activity because you are providing insights. And if you choose carefully who is going to review your documents, you could establish some networking that it's good for your project. But take care of that. And then, I mean, this is one of the things that is important is to set regular meetings with them and basically involve them as the stakeholders in the decision making. I mean, what we have done and has worked so well is to involve them into the task meetings. I mean, wherever we have a task meeting, I mean, with the different works, teams that have been working, the advisory board, or not all the advisory board, but the members that are most related to this task are invited, and they wanted, and we make them to participate into the discussion and to the decision making. I mean, and this has worked so well in 3 of the tasks that we have doing so far, that later on we'll discuss a little bit about one of them. But do not aim low. I mean, your objectives have to be to make joint research paper, joint conference, joint spillover projects, join things with your advisory board. I mean, it's not just that you wanted their expert opinion, you wanted to involve them into your project. I mean, it's a good thing to involve external agents into your projects and to bring a new vision and bring an expertise that probably you do not have, or it's very difficult to have it inside your consortium. So this is another important things to have. So now to one of the easiest one is summer schools. This is a wonderful dissemination and communication activity that we should try to foster more into our projects, in my opinion. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity to bring your advisory board and to a stakeholder into the project and to discuss and to meet with them. if you do it face-to-face, it's better. This is something that was previously said before. And also you are not only fulfilling this networking activity, but also you are instructing the new generation. As you are instructing the new generation, you are facilitating the update of your results, because you cannot only put new generation into the summer school, you can also address experts. For example, what we are doing now in the skill workshop here in EMP. It's also a networking activity, and of course, it's a perfect excuse to meet face-to-face and to do some team building activities that nowadays is something that we have taken for granted, and now it's more and more an important thing for the projects. So, but be careful, because if you try to restrict to only face-to-face, you are losing a lot of opportunities. So embrace the new normality and try to think in this type of hybrid and federated strategy. So you are trying to organize the course in several campuses, let's say, at the same time, and everyone in its campus is face-to-face, but it's attend virtually to the things that happen in the rest of the campus. So you can address a large geographically area, and you can combine both things. And also don't forget that if you all bring in an online team, bring an online course, you can address more people across the globe, because they don't have to travel, it's cheaper, and this kind of things. So, and now to the last part that has been already been highly discussed in the first panelist. This is something that is really important. We need to try to embrace open source. As he said, this is the new normality. Everyone expects that you open your code. But building an open source community is hard and very time consuming. So before starting a new community, you need to try to, if you are going to try to to build a new community, try to easy the thing as much as you can. So you need to not only to publish your data, your code, you need to provide everything that you can. So participate in conference to increase the visibility, but also create a very good documentation. I think it's important, create very good tutorials and this kind of thing. So we have already created a couple of results, code on the project, in white project, but this is not our objective. Our main objective is more to collaborate with existing communities, because it's far easier to collaborate with an existing community than to try to build another one, even if this meant to do an amendment, as we have done. We have included a new partner to be able to collaborate with an existing community, and it's far easier to collaborate than to create a new one. Because a lot of things that you need to do if you wanted to do create a new community is going to be granted. The procedures, the collaborators, the technical communication channel, the infrastructure is all there, or should be there, and it's better if you fit there than to try to build everything from scratch. This is something that you need to consider twice before trying to do a new model or to create a new thing. So in brief, I think that open science is a powerful dissemination activity, and that will bring a new vision for your project. But that also is an interesting tool for exploitation. Don't forget that we should exploit the results, and open science is a way to bring people to foster the exploitation of your results. And the key is involve early everyone, and not only to involve early, but then continue their involvement and take advantage of the virtual solution, because nowadays we don't need to travel. It's a trade-off. You can get to more people more easier, but the type of links that you make are softer. So you need to do it more regularly, and also trying to plan to have hybrid when having physical meetings, because you make a strong bonds when you are physical meeting, but you are left a lot of people behind. So if you can make this kind of hybrid system, you could try to have both things into one. And thank you for your attention, and I hope I am on time. Pau, I don't know.
Thank you very much. I think we're fine. So thank you very much. People having questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm having one specific question because I've found it quite interesting that you also described your experiences with working with stakeholders. And I was just wondering, because when we talk about how to upload data in a way to share it with everyone, I think most of the audience, most people, we always think of quantitative data. We think of what are the costs, what are the scenario results and all this. However, how do we deal with qualitative information that we've gathered? Like, for example, if you interview people, you have all this information. At the same time, you might not even be allowed to put this online somewhere for people to share because it's confidential. At the same time, like the transcribed information, the coded information afterwards might be very helpful for other people to look at it, to compare cases and so on. So how have you dealt with these things? And is it something that you are aware of, or do you say this open community, well, this is for modelers, this is for quantitative things? Yeah.
No. We have a strong track record on qualitative data. And in fact, later today in the modeling of socioeconomic session, I think it's parallel session 8 or 10, we are going to present the results of one of the activities where we are going to show how we have coding all these qualitative data. But in the interviews that we have done with stakeholders, what we have done, I mean, we have not completely done a coding. What we have done is trying to approach a more softer results. I mean, what we have done is each one has to present a summary, and then we have to try to reach an agreement, and then we have to try to write some sort of, not manifesto, but I mean, a summary of all the contribution for everyone. And this is publishable because we have removed most of the confidential information. Moreover, in one of the deliverables that we are already provided, I think it's already in the webpage, we have taken, let's say, the extract of every contribution that we have gotten from the interviews in a very careful way. I mean, not very structured. I mean, it's just a list of sentences addressing, I mean, as there is a semi-structured interviews. We have been discussing this topic, and these are the key points that have been raised by this person. Well, not person, I mean, this profile, because we have hidden the name of the person and these kind of things. So I think that this is the best way that, I mean, the best solution that we have found for sharing these kind of things. But yes, this is a key point. I mean, yeah. There is another alternative that we have found in another project, creating taxonomies of what are the best results and providing a mix of qualitative and quantitative information. I mean, this is the taxonomy and this is the statistic description. How many people have said that this is an important, but then you need to address the main problem of coding, and you need to have two-person coding and this kind of thing. So, but there is some methodologies for doing that.
Thank you very much for sharing these. Then there's another question by Pedro Crespo del Granado from NTNU. What is the concrete expected output at the end of the project of Y?
There is going to be what we call the Y toolkit. There is going to be, one of the key points that those stakeholders say is that we have to have a modular approach. We cannot do a one solution that fit all. So what we have done into the project is to separate into different components. So we are going to do like a component is going to provide what is called a causal model. That is a model that will link, let's say, a socioeconomic description of people and their investment potential of different topics and different fields. This is going to be then later on used on a building simulation model. So what we are going to do is to simulate the behavior of a P person after he has made their investment decisions into a building site. And then after, we are going to address not just a building, but complex of building to tackle also energy communities. And this inside the building, we are also tackling sector coupling between heat and electricity, district heatings, electric vehicles, and this kind of things. And after we have gone to these steps, what we are going to do is to jump to an uptake module, where we are going to go from a building, let's say, to whatever you need in order to plug into energy system model. For example, we have 5 different use cases. One is going to be a microgrid, so it's going to be a couple of buildings, let's say. Then we are going to have a city scale when we are going to go a little bit more bigger. Then we are going to have also a use case from the perspective of energy retailer and what is going to happen with their pool of consumers or partners. And then we have 2 big energy system models. So what we are going to do is to plug our results to upscale until they can be used by them. And from that point, okay, we are going to have assessed a couple of scenarios and trying to test and assess what is going to happen on different scenarios that we are going to provide. So this is basically, let's say, the modules that we are going to produce. And then we are going to have like 5 use cases where we are going to do several different scenarios and several different questions that we wanted to address in each one of them.
Thank you very much. So then thank you very much. And I would hand over basically to Sebastian for presenting the next speaker. And then if you have additional more questions to Cruz, feel free to type them into the Q&A and then he can answer them in parallel. Or after the last talk, we will also have a big round for all people to discuss with one another. So therefore there's still room for additional input. Handing over to
Thank
you.
you, Paul.
Thanks. So our next speaker is Dr. Regine Bellhomme. Regine is senior engineer and senior project manager in the power markets and energy markets division of EDF. And Regine will present to us on the result of the Magnitude project with a focus on unlocking the flexibility potential of multi-energy systems. So Regine, I hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you very much for this introduction. So, as you said, so I'm the coordinator of the Magnitude project, and so I'm going to try to explain how in the project we were able to unlock the flexibility potential of multi-energy system. And so I will present the main result and the lessons learned from our project. And since we speak in this session about modeling, I will also speak about the different tools, modeling and simulation tools that we developed in the project. Okay, first, what was the objective of the Magnitude project? So the Magnitude project aimed to develop optimization and coordination tools, as well as business and market mechanisms, to provide flexibility to the European electricity system by multi-energy system. And so I will explain afterwards what does it mean in the project. But the idea is to exploit the synergies between electricity, gas, and heating and cooling systems. And what for? In fact, to support the cost-effective integration of renewables and enhance the security of supply on the electricity system. Another objective that we had in the project was to bring under a common framework technical solutions, market design, and business models. And of course, to contribute to the ongoing policy discussion in the energy field. Okay, so what was our approach in the project? So first, we started by identifying and characterizing the flexibility services that multi-energy system can provide to the electricity system. Another step was to study the flexibility capabilities of different technologies and multi-energy system, and mainly those that we considered in the case studies that I'm going to present you later. We also developed the technical and commercial functional architectures of the project and the business use case that we studied in the project. We developed tools for the simulation and the optimization of control strategies of technologies and multi-energy system in order to maximize the provision of flexibility services. Then we studied the benefits of the aggregation of the flexibilities of decentralized multi-energy system. So integrated in aggregation tools with other resources. We also proposed and studied innovative market design in order to increase the synergies at the level of the markets, electricity, gas and heat markets themselves, and we implemented some of them on a market simulation platform. And then of course we assessed the overall system, that's to say multi-energy system, aggregation platform and market simulation on real life case studies. We studied also the replicability of the business use case in the project. And we also established or developed, assessed, let's say, business models for the multi-energy system operator and for the aggregator. We also developed a light implementation, let's say, of a multi-energy data hub between the multi-energy system and the other stakeholders. And finally, we identified the main lessons learned in the project and developed policy strategy and recommendations in the pan-European perspectives. Okay, so that means that in fact in the project we develop a whole chain of tools that is represented here. And so in real life, these tools will be operated by different stakeholders and being in competition well, with other stakeholders. So these are market participants in competition with other market participants. And so in real life, these tools will interact between each other. Now, concerning the tools for the simulation and optimization of multi-energy system, aggregation platform, market emulator, and all market simulator, these tools were assessed on, let's say, 7 real-life case studies. And in fact, in the project, so we had to look at how we were going to proceed for this assessment. And so we developed, in fact, what we call the simulation use case. That's in fact a sequence diagram explaining the interaction between the different modules that we developed in the project. And for instance, you can see that for the aggregation platform, we have different modules. And of course, these different models and modules were developed by different partners, but had to interact between each other. And so they did so through what we call the central project database that is represented here in green in this picture. And so you can see that each module is uploading its results on the database, and other modules are getting their result there. And then once they have processed, they have done their job, let's say, they put their results on this database. And this allowed us to, in some way, realize this interaction between the tools and modules in a rather close way or closely similar way as it can be in real life. Now, regarding the assessment of the tools, so as I have explained, we assessed our tools on 7 real-life case studies. And so we had the district heating and cooling networks of Malar Energy in Sweden, an integrated pulp and paper mill in Austria. We had low temperature district heating network of Hofor in Denmark. And what we studied specifically in that case were the distributed unit at consumers, so to raise the temperature to produce hot water. We had the Milan district heating network in Italy. We had the steel industry and a combined cycle gas turbine in Newport Talbot in the UK. And we looked at how they can solve congestion due to large renewable plants connected to the grid. We had a wastewater treatment plant. And in Paris-Saclay in France, we had the district heating and cooling network. And so for each of these case studies, we studied how they can provide flexibility services, both in the existing configuration, but also when we consider some improvement strategies that are represented here in the column, in the third column. And well, most of them concern increased storage capabilities, but also some control and communication interfaces, and in one case it's also to add PV resources. And so for each of these case studies, we studied, let's say, how they can provide 2 to 3 different services. And so this is represented in the fourth column. And in fact, the services that we considered is so the participation to the day-ahead and the intraday energy market, the provision of balancing and frequency reserve services for the TSO, so frequency containment reserve, automatic frequency restoration reserve, and manual frequency restoration reserve. Redispatching and active power control for congestion management on distribution network for some case, and transmission network for another case study. And then capacity requirement mechanisms, which may take very different form depending on the country. And for instance, this may be a market capacity in the UK, or strategic reserve like in Sweden. Okay, so now I'm going to present some results that we obtained from this assessment on the case studies. And then the first one is that we can say that a multi-energy system can provide flexibility to support the integration of renewables in the electricity system, and therefore contribute to decarbonization of the energy system. And they really have potential to participate in energy markets, frequency ancillary service procurement, and congestion management. But of course, this strongly depends on the technologies that we have on the multi-energy site, the way they are operated, so the operation strategies, and of course the process that is involved. If it is a district heating network or an industrial process, the capabilities are different, of course. But what we have seen also, and this is represented in this figure, is that only a small portion of the available flexibility is actually activated. That's to say that the corresponding energy is delivered. And so here in the figure, we represent the average activated flexibility in percentage of the available flexibility. And so you see that the percentage is rather low. And in the best case, it's 20%, but also in let's say, it may be also only a few percent. And why? Why do we have this situation? And so there are several reasons for that. So we can have, of course, limitation due to the technical capabilities of the technologies with respect to the requirements of the product that are traded on the market, like full activation time, minimum duration of the product, symmetry of the product, and so on. And that means that there are some key parameters that have to be known regarding these technologies, but also the multi-energy system as a whole. And they have also to be monitored, like ramp rate, startup time, power range, and so on, but also local constraints on mechanical stress and so on. Another point that should be kept in mind is that multi-energy system, in fact, flexibility provision is not their core business, and they have, let's say, another main activities, and they will give the priority to this activity. So that's to say, to supply heat or cooling, to produce paper or steel, treat wastewater, and so on. And this, of course, will bring some limitation for the flexibility provision. Another important aspect that the simulation showed is that when you provide flexibility, so you introduce, or you change, of course, the operation plan of the multi-energy system, but this introduced a sort of disoptimization of the multi-energy system operation. So with respect to the technologies, but also with respect to the markets and so on. For instance, to provide flexibility, you may need to use some technologies that are more expensive than others. And that can lead to increased operating costs, and that means that the multi-energy system will then participate in the flexibility market if sufficient revenues can be expected to cover these extra costs. And of course, another aspect is the seasonal nature of some processes. And the best example maybe is the district heating and cooling system. Of course, we can have improvements when we consider storage. So if we increase or introduce storage, heating, heat storage, cooling, steam, gas, and so on. And we have indeed seen that depending on the week, depending on the case studies and so on, the introduction of storage may increase the flexibility by a few percent, but it can also be multiplied by a factor of 5. But a compromise has to be found, because if you oversize the storage, this may reduce the profitability. Another improvement is brought by aggregation of multi-energy system with other resources in the aggregation pool, because it provides an access to the market, to markets that the multi-energy system cannot be able to access alone. In terms, for example, of technical capability or threshold to access the market and so on. And in particular, this figure illustrates the impact on the thresholds, where we can see that with the pool, so in green, when the threshold increases, you can trade more flexibility than the multi-energy system alone. This is represented by the blue line, multi-energy system, the blue line, the pool, the green one. And this, of course, allows to increase the exploitable capacity of the multi-energy system. But aggregation has a cost for the multi-energy system, and also well, let's say because we have the multi-energy system has to share the revenues with the aggregator. And so depending on the revenue sharing, well, this will decrease the revenue of the multi-energy system. And this will also increase the cost of the bids that will be proposed on the market. So this may have a significant impact on profitability, as we will see later in the business model. Then another point is that aggregation is data-driven. So that means that we need to have an appropriate ICT infrastructure, and also easy access to data, in particular market data, but also some data on the technologies. Now, coming to market and regulatory issues. Presently, I think that you know that there are ongoing harmonization initiatives in Europe in order to harmonize the different types of markets, but this is not ongoing. And that means that there are still large diversities between countries for some mechanism, and in particular for balancing and frequency reserve services. Capacity requirement mechanism, it's even more the case, and also congestion management. In addition, this is a very fast evolving field. That means that the rules may change from one year to the other, and sometimes even several times during the year. And that means that this is highly complex field, in particular for small stakeholders. And also this leads to replicability issues for the tools of the aggregator and the traders. There are still some rules or requirements that limit the service provision by multi-energy system in some countries. In particular, well, some technologies are not accepted on some markets, and also aggregation sometimes in some countries is not allowed. And there are also some issues specific to some types of markets in some countries. For instance, for intraday markets, where there is, we can see a lack of liquidity or an insufficient difference with respect to the day-ahead market prices. Other issues can be seen on the frequency reserve services, where we see that the threshold, minimum bit size threshold to access the market may be very high in some cases. So we have seen on the previous figures that in some cases it's maybe 5 megawatts. And another issue is related to the payment for the frequency reserve services. In some countries, so the payment is done only for the energy which is actually activated by the TSO, and there's no payment for the reserve as such, or for the capacity. And since this activation, so the probability of activation may be rather low, that means that there's a high uncertainty for the flexibility providers regarding the revenues that they can expect. And of course, this is a risk for flexibility providers. Another issue is about the symmetry of some products, so that's to say that the provider, flexibility provider, must be able to provide the same amount both in increase or in decrease, and this is not compatible with some of the processes for multi-energy system. Another issue is linked to the, let's say, to the network charges, taxes, charges or contribution for race, which can be very different from one country to the other. And depending on the structure, this may reduce the profitability of the flexibility provision. Of course, there's a need for improved compatibility between incentive schemes. Well, there are some schemes, for instance, it's the heat part that may limit the provision of flexibility to the electricity system. And of course, there's a need for improved coordination between network operators, not only in the electricity system between the distribution system operator or transmission system operator, but also between the network operator of the different energy carrier. Now we have, as I have explained, we studied also some innovative market design, where we, let's say, introduce some integrated multi-carrier day-ahead markets. So some, let's say, coupled markets in some in a simplified way, and we have seen that indeed this can increase the economic benefits of the stakeholders and the economic efficiency. But depending on the type of, let's say, of market design and the type of organization, this may indeed lead or require some organizational changes that may be rather important. And before, let's say, before implementation of such organizational changes, cost-benefit analysis are required, not only in terms of implementation of these changes, but also in terms of transaction cost of the stakeholders and so on. Now, business models. Okay, so as I said, we studied the business models for the multi-energy system operator and for the aggregator for the 7 case studies that we had in the project. And we took, let's say, an assumption of 20 versus 80% revenue sharing between the aggregator and the multi-energy system operator. Another hypothesis or assumption that we took is that in the base case, we already include the optimization with respect to the day-ahead energy market. And so this this table show the result of the business model, so that you can see that for some of the case studies, we do not have any business models like Malar Energy. Okay, just one thing that I should specify is that the B that you see in the column is the base case, and I mean with improvement strategies, okay? And so that means that for some case studies like Malar Energy, we do not have any profitable business model in both types of configuration. For other case studies like NPT, for example, we have profitable business model in both cases. And then for other, it really depends. So for example, for ACS with the improvement strategy, we have a profitable business model for both MS operator and aggregator. But in the base case, you see that it's not profitable for the multi-energy system operator, but for the aggregator. So in that case, the conclusion is no. Okay, I'm not going to detail all this. But what we can say is that really profitability depends on all the aspects that I have presented before. So that's to say, it depends, of course, on the regulatory framework and the remuneration and structure of remuneration, the market rules and the mechanisms, the operation strategy of the multi-energy system. So if really the priority is completely given to the process and there's no possibility to provide flexibility, so or limited possibility, let's say. The revenue sharing between multi-energy system operator and aggregator, so this 20 versus 80% revenue sharing has an impact, and we have started, well, we have made some very preliminary let's say analysis. For instance, for ACS, we have taken another revenue share. Let's say 90% for the multi-energy system and 10% for the aggregator. And this allowed us indeed to find a profitable business models. And so that means that really this has to be studied carefully. And then, of course, well, the improvement strategy. So we can see that in most of the cases allows to find profitable business model. And another thing that we should say is that the improvement strategy in itself, let's say, may have a profitable business model. So that's to say, without the provision of flexibility, the improvement strategy itself can be profitable. But it's not the case for all the case studies. So thank you very much for your attention. But just before, I would like to add something here. It's just if you would like to see our results, so of course, at least the public results, they can be available on the Magnitude website, but we also have a Magnitude community on Zenodo, where you can find, let's say, where you can find also some public databases that we have uploaded there. So thank you very much, and then I can answer the question.
Thank you very much, Regine. I do not see a question yet, so I will start first. I think, yeah, quite of relevance what you showed us also in view of the European EU strategy for sector integration and quite a hands-on perspective. So first, question for understanding. So all the results are based on current market designs, right? And then maybe adding to that, you said you also explored some more innovative future market designs. Can you give us a bit an idea of what could be elements of such a multi-carrier energy markets?
Okay. In fact, in the project, we let's identify, let's say, 5 different market schemes that did well. How to say? So one of them is really the system very close to what we have now. That's to say that we have electricity markets separated from gas market, and at the level of the heat, we do not have market presently, but we imagine that we have a market at the heat level. Okay, so this is our first. And so electricity and gas market are at the national level, whereas the heat market is at the local level. Okay, so this is the first one. And then we try to see to combine different possibilities. So that's to say, regarding, let's say, the global, local aspects of the market, but also the way they are coupled. And maybe I will not go into the detail, but let's say that what was implemented in the market simulator is, let's say, the last one. So that's to say that we have a sort of unique market for electricity, gas, and heat at the national level, but taking into account, of course, the local characteristics of the heat market. And so we develop all the clearing mechanism and so on for these types of market, and they were implemented on the market simulator that was developed in the project. We also propose new types of orders or bits for these markets to be able to take into account of the specificities of the conversion technology. So that's to say the possibility to let's say, make a bid on the market, but not necessarily specifying the type of energy, but with some coefficient explaining that if it is gas, but the relationship between gas, electricity, and so on. I don't know if I'm clear, but it's better to, well, when we can show an example, but I don't have an example now, but just, sorry?
Okay, I expect there's some material then on the web. Is it published already, information on this?
We already have some papers. Regarding the market scheme, it's a public deliverable, but it's the market scheme. Now, the results, okay, the results on this are in some public papers, but also there is a summary in the deliverable on the lessons learned, which is a public one. But of course, it's a summary. But okay, that's what I can. On the Zenodo community, you can find some papers and some information, and as well also on the Magnitude website for the public deliverable.
Okay, thanks.
And okay, maybe it's just something that. So we studied indeed the energy, the economic efficiency of this market and compare them, and so. Well, there are some results.
Okay, thanks. Very interesting indeed. Then there's also one question on the chat. Maybe you can then give a short answer here and add to it in the chat if needed. So the question comes from Nikolaus Huben from TU Wien, and he says, first of all, excellent presentation. And I see that, I'm reading it now, I see that aggregators were not profitable in all case studies. Could you talk about the different cost components of the aggregators considered in your case studies?
Okay. In fact, it's a bit difficult because, in fact, regarding the business use case, we took into account we made a very detailed analysis of the cost. Okay, so that means that regarding aggregators, we took into account, of course, the cost of the aggregation platform, of the ICT aspects, and so on. Also, maybe some aspects linked to the certification on the markets. So all the cost of resource, I have to say, human resources and so on. So this is a very detailed analysis that we made for the different stakeholders, for multi-energy system and so on. And but something that I've said, which is very important, is the sharing between the multi-energy system, the aggregators, and the resources in the aggregation pool. It's better to say it this way, because in fact, in our aggregation pool, we had other resources in the multi-energy system. And so we shared the same way the revenues between aggregator and the multi-energy system. And as I said, also, it really depends also on the market characteristics. If you do not have revenues for the reserve, for instance, or things like that, that means that you may have revenues only when it is activated, as I said. And so there are not only, let's say, cost aspect of the aggregators that have to be taken into account in the business model for the aggregator, but also, let's say, the impact on the revenues. And as I said, well, since you have, of course, the remuneration, another thing also that we have to take into account is that the aggregator must be remunerated for his job. So that means that, and so this, if we take a minimum, let's say, remuneration, or if just we cover the cost, that will increase the price of the bids that will be proposed on the market. So it's a very complex thing that we studied in detail, and so that's why it's difficult to say that it's only due to the cost. I don't know if I answered the question, but
yeah, I think yes. I think it's we all see it's a complex issue, but I think you answered it very well. Yeah. So then thank you very much again, Regine. So now we have 15 minutes left, and so we would ask now all the panelists to turn on their cameras again, and we have time for a short joint discussion. And I would first hand over to Payu again to kick this off with his question or remarks.
Yes, thank you very much to everyone. And also, once again, not the people that cannot show their screens. And so you can still, of course, contribute and put in your questions in the Q&A. I think this is really important. And therefore, I now also encourage all the others to basically address one another. And I would take the first part and basically just repeating a question that Daniel put, because Daniel actually introduced the scenario editor and then, for example, also put this open question there, which until now no one has responded to. And how far is something like this scenario editor helpful for people? So basically one project coming up with, okay, we put all our scenario data there and feel free to compare yourselves with this. Is this something that is useful for others? Or is this something which you would also say with your experience is not that easy for other projects because they don't have it as deliverable, so they don't have to, and it's not always that easy necessarily to see how to put it in, and then maybe you don't want to compare your results to those because it's different assumptions, and so therefore do you find something like this helpful? So feel free to comment on this or come up with other questions or comments to others. So whenever you want to say something, feel free to raise your hand physically or using Zoom functionalities. Okay. So Cruz, you're the first, yeah.
Yeah, let's break the ice. We have been discussing about that in a project proposal that we have been starting to manage now. And it's not an easy question. I mean, and it's not easily solved because, I mean, depending on how you configure your project or how your project configure, it's not easy to take some time to do this kind of joint assessment. Several ideas that we have is to try to create some sort of competition with very high quotes, I mean, in order to foster, let's say, collaboration. But I think that the very way forward is that this has to be written into the call. I mean, the call has to preserve. So have to be there that you need to share results and this kind of thing. But I think that the first step is to try to have something like the IASA model comparison or result comparison online. I mean, this is a pre-requirement. I mean, we need to have the tools to compare results of different models. And then you need to foster the participation on this kind of tool. I mean, it's the IASA tool is one. I mean, I'm not suggesting that the European Commission has to ask for everyone to put their data on the IASA, but I think we need to have this kind of tools first, and then we need to bring the participation there. Well, because you kind to do some hackathons like session to bring a prize to put into the call that you need to compare the results and make your assessment on doing this kind of, I don't know if you know the Bridge initiative. It's an initiative for more technical projects where a lot of projects have to have some time reserved to participate in this Bridge initiative, and it's then it's run by CSA call. I mean, and it continues into the project. And I think that there are like 50 technical projects there, and they have some working groups, and you need to collaborate with with one or several of the working group. And what they do with the working group is to put in common what they are doing and try to reach standards, compare results, best practices, foster, provide policy advice to the commission and this kind of thing. And I think that something similar should be made on this front. We have to work in projects, and we need to continue working in projects as open as we can, trying to collaborate and this kind of thing. But then this has to be a different things where everyone has to put there in the same, let's say, position, okay, and share results, discuss results, and then try to write something like in conclusion about the topic. But I know it's difficult, but the IPCC has been doing that for a lot of years. They take a time, because from one inform to the next, it takes time, but something similar to this, we need to go in that direction. I think that this is the direction that we should take, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I think with this question, with this response, you already answered part of the question of Kerstin van Mark from PTJ. She said, thanks to all for the interesting insights. And her question is, what has to happen that even more collaborative work is carried out on existing open data framework models and platforms instead of always creating new open tools, data and platforms? So therefore, and how far do the other panelists, do they agree with what Cruz has said? Or can you think also of other ideas of how to encourage people not to reinvent the wheel always, but use existing stuff? Daniel, yeah.
Thanks for the question, Kerstin, and also for the answer, Cruz. I really like what Cruz said in his presentation, that we have to start like collaborating with an existing community rather than creating a new community from fresh. The question is how we can actually do this, and because Cruz now also mentioned the IPCC, I've been involved a very little bit in the IPCC working group 1, so the climate models where you need supercomputers, and that community has really understood that you have to collaborate, because if every model run gives you a petabyte of data, you can't just do it on your laptop. Whereas the energy systems modeling that we are doing here, you can do it on a laptop, which is great because everybody can just download some open source tool, can just download some data and start playing around. But from that, too often follows this, well, I just can create my own stuff and I don't need to look around whether something else exists. Because you're not, from a technical point of view, forced to use existing tools. I think what really needs to change, and is already changing, is this different mentality, that there are these tools that are accepted as standards or data formats and that people migrate to. So this herd effect or network effects are starting to take hold, I hope, and should become even stronger over the next couple of years, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Handing over directly back to Cruz.
Yes, I just wanted to make a short comment about Daniel. Yeah, you can run the models in your laptop, but I think that in a couple of years, you are not going to be able to do that. The complexity of the model, when you start linking with coupling sectors and going below NUTS 2 level, this is not going to be able to be run anymore in a laptop. The complexity is exploding. And if you go sub-yearly, and it is when you are starting including renewable energy demand response and this kind of action, you are starting making feedback loops and a very high resolution, and things literally explode. So I think that in a couple of years, it's going to be a hard requirement to run your models in supercomputers. So, and this will need to foster collaboration, not just between models, but with other external actors that are going to be new, let's say. are the people that run actually these computers, and this is going to be a fun. For my point of view, it's going to be fun. I mean,
Thank you very much. Then I would hand over to Sandrine, and I would address in a different question in addition to you, Sandrine, because you're from EDF, and I could imagine that for a company, it is also has different challenges and additional challenges with respect to these open tools and software compared to, I would say, pure academic institutions. So therefore, in how far is this a challenge also for companies, or in how far could they play a different role in that?
So first, just to go back to what Cruz was just saying. So I just wanted to mention that we are already there. If you go back to what I presented, when you want to go deeper into the modeling, like modeling the dynamics, the uncertainties and everything, it's just impossible to run it on a laptop. So today we are already running on supercomputers. And this is why we have implemented all this environment stuff to make it doable by everyone, because it's not something that someone can do alone in his office. And I think this is something that is a bit missing in that sharing community. It's the people that are able to build those tools that will help us include our models in sort of containers and be able to run them anywhere. And those people, they exist, and they are available and very happy to contribute, but they have to be linked to. Then to go back to what Pao you were saying, well, we as an industry, so of course we have our own models, our own data sets, our own studies. So this is some part is well, business sensitive, so it cannot be shared, but there is more and more the shared part. So what we have been doing with the Plant-RES project, everything is open. It's a bit new for us, but it depends on the topics. On the climate modeling topic, lots of things are already open because the need of sharing, the need of comparing is growing and growing. When you are publishing a study or looking at a study, scenarios published by someone, you want to be able to assess it, you want to be able to compare it, and this is only possible if the model is not a black box and if the data is not completely well, hidden. And so you can say whatever you want. If you cannot show the model and the data, it's difficult to say, oh yes, you're right. So I think that even for people with business, it's more and more important that things go more and more transparent. And this is what we liked very much in the Open Entrance project in particular.
Thank you very much. Then handing over the floor as a last comment to Regine also.
Okay, so indeed, I would like to add something regarding your question, Paolo. In the magnitude project, maybe you have seen that we were dealing with market participant in competition. And that means that indeed, in these tools that we were developing, in fact, it's very difficult to share them. I don't speak for EDF because, in fact, but I speak for the other participants that we had in the project, for example, for the aggregators or for some industrial processes. Maybe what can be shared is maybe the model of some technologies that are, let's say, rather widely used. But then, of course, the optimization strategy and so on, they really give, let's say, competitive advantage to this market participant. And in some cases, also the tools like the aggregation platform, some tools of the aggregation platform, they cannot be shared because then, it's a competitive aspect between the different market participants. And I don't know how to solve this, okay? Really, the way that we did in the project is really to go to this central database where different modules exchange. And so we had very standardized data format so that these different parts of tools can exchange information, or at least the data that they need to do the process. Another aspect is about data. models is one thing, data is another thing. And in fact, in the project, again, since at the level of the multi-energy system, the data were also confidential, not all of them, but some of them, well, for some process, it were really confidential. So the way is to sign non-disclosure agreement. But something that I would like to say is that there are some data, for example, on the markets and so on, and you have to pay for them. And so it's not really, a good thing, I would say, because of course, now that means that for the next project, we need to include a budget to buy data. Okay, for example, if I see, well, we had to collect different market data, and let's say for EPEX spots, for example, these are paying data. Okay, and I don't know how well this can be solved either, but I would like these are part of the thing that we met in the project also. Okay.
Thank you very much to everyone, and also thanks for all the important insights. I think Sebastian, me would like to thank all of you for sharing these insights. We want to thank all participants also and being on time also. And I think the importance is that we all agree, basically. I think there's a clear vision that we need more open data, open models. We need to cooperate more. We are aware that we will need this more because things become more complex. It's the way exactly is not clear because there's still a lot of open ways to go forward. There's a lot of things ongoing, which I think is also great. And therefore, with this, let me close this session by just advertising once more that the program is not finished, but actually now at exactly 2 o'clock sharp, there is 4 different parallel sessions. You're invited to choose which one of them you are most interested in, basically, and then there's a closing session. So thank you once more for everybody for sticking around with us today. Have a nice lunchtime. And after lunchtime, then of course, join these parallel sessions. So therefore, thanks once more to everybody and looking forward to maybe another online conference in the next month or EMP-E, hopefully in physical presence in Brussels next year. So take care, everybody, and see you around.